This episode is groundbreaking. This episode is mind-blowing for the simple reason that I will be discussing this very interesting topic. It's a topic that has been, trending for a couple of times, especially with the latest, increase in military coups in Africa. I just want to talk today about constitutional coups. Constitutional coups are, for some reasons, not really treated with the same severity as when it comes to military coups. And I'm trying to understand why. We're all trying to understand why, because a military coup is a non-democratic process of power seizing. But a constitutional coup, the answer is not as easy. And I will try and explain that to you throughout the coming podcast. Welcome to your favorite podcast, Smart, Intellectual, Knowledgeable African. I'm S.I.K.A. And by the way, I don't know your name, so it will be very refreshing to type your name in the comment below, because I always introduce myself without knowing the name of the member of this amazing and brilliant community of young African intellectuals and people who are passionate about Africa's development. Well, I personally enjoyed this episode because I remember I made some episode actually discussing the situation in Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger when I was giving my position with regard to the meaning of those three countries leaving the ECOWAS. And with my friends, the position were very mitigated because some were in favor, some were not. But the point is not to have a community of followers. The point of S.I.K.A. Talks is to have a community of active people engaging actively and constantly on the most important issues. So it's very interesting to have people who actually disagree with me and my views. So with my friends, some of them were saying that, but Philippe, we understand your position about the ECOWAS is not treating constitutional coups with the same seriousness as when it comes to military coups. For instance, we know a lot of countries, African countries, member of the African Union, and also member of the ECOWAS, like Cote d'Ivoire, where president, changed the constitution to actually do more than 2 terms. And the ECOWAS never said anything so. Therefore, you should understand why it's very difficult to trust them. And I agree. I definitely agree with that analysis. It's very difficult to trust the ECOWAS. But in my opinion, it's very important to distinguish or to specify where the absence of trust lies. Of course, when it comes to the credibility of the ECOWAS, in terms of condemning, violation of key democratic tenets, of course, the ECOWAS is definitely not a credible institution at all. But does it mean that they are not credible when it comes to the overall picture? Of course, this is not the goal of this episode. But what I'm trying to tell you here is that in this episode and the next one, I will be discussing the implication of constitutional coups when it comes to, the international or the sub-regional credibility, but also try to provide you with some answers as to why international organizations, not just the ECOWAS, but even the EU, even, developed nations like the America, the USA, why they are being more lenient when it comes to constitutional coups versus military coups. Welcome to your favorite podcast, Smart, Intellectual, Knowledgeable African. It's a pleasure to be with you. If you're not yet a part of our amazing community, it's not difficult. All you have to do is to click on the subscribe button, activate the ring bell, and you'll be set for good and for life, because we don't want to see you leave. Anyway, now that I discussed the context, I also introduced the relevance of the topic. Like I said, this episode is mind-blowing. You will learn a lot of stuff. I personally did when preparing this episode because as you noticed, I do these podcast on my feet. I do not write anything down, so that's the reason why sometimes I seem to be all over the place because I need to gather my thought. But overall, I do a bit of research, of course, because I don't want to be talking bullshit here. So I do a bit of research, and when I gather my thought around the research, I provide you with the key takeaway. So the first question I want to ask you when it comes to constitutional coups, do you have an idea of how many constitutional coups happen in Africa from, let's say, 2000, like up to 2000, up to now? Well, okay, I'm not going to give you the answer now. The second question I want to ask you, do you have an idea of the average, constitution change, that took place or that are actually taking place, in an African country? And for the record, the reason why I'm talking about African country when it comes to constitutional coups does not mean that other part of the region in the world, also like did not experience constitutional coups or never experienced it. There are countries, outside Africa, which experience constitutional coups, but like they are not they are not actually the focus of this episode. So just to get this clear. So I'm going to give you an revision of its meaning actually. In Gabon, talking about like before 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, August 2023, revision the country, and I'm talking about Gabon, underwent from the 1991 revision to 2023. In less than 40 years, the constitution has been modified 9 times. This is incredible. How many times has the Constitution of America, which actually exists for over 200 years, been modified? Can you take a guess? Well, 27 times since the American Constitution has been ratified in 1789. The American Constitution has been modified 27 times from 1789 up to now. So to be fair, okay, I'm making the analysis. So, to be fair, I'm making this analysis for Gabon and the USA. In the Gabonese context, we have a constitution that is actually 33 years old because it was ratified in 1991 and it's been modified 9 times, which actually gives us a ratio of a modification happening every 3.5 years versus the American context where we have a constitution being ratified in 1789 and being ratified 27 times from that year up to 2023, which means it's almost 240 years of existence. And you have the Constitution being only ratified 27 times, which gives us a ratio of 8.5 years, which means that in America, the Constitution is being changed or modified every 8.5 years minimum, compared to Gabon, which is a younger country with a younger constitution and younger and even like less economic performance, economic pressure, development and stuff like that, but having the constitution being modified twice as fast as, the time needed in America. So what explains that? What could be the reason why the constitution in a developing country like Gabon is being modified, like way more than the constitution in a developed economy such as America? And what does it mean? Does it mean that there's a link between economic development or political stability with constitution change? Or what? What is it that we are trying to understand? And these are legitimate questions we should ask ourselves when trying to understand, the rationale around, constitutional coups. But I also asked you if you had an idea of, the number of attempts, at constitutional coups in Africa. Well, to also try and answer this question, I'll tell you right now that it's been 24. The African continent recorded 24 attempts over the 20 years to amend constitution to extend power. And this is very, very interesting. In the American context, we had 27 times, the constitution being amended. In Africa, from 2002 to 2023, we had 24 attempts at modifying the constitution. And the 24 attempts were justified by the same and the only reason, which was to extend power, to extend the possibility or the likelihood of remaining in power. Unlike in America, where the constitutional change were not solely driven by extension of power, but by other, rationale. So this gives you an example, and this is very interesting to actually set the core and set the context so that you understand the background here, why constitutional coups are so predominant in Africa. And the key driver of constitutional coups is actually power extension. The reason why incumbent president, the reason why head of states currently go through a constitution change is because they want to be given the possibility to stay in power longer. And of the 24 attempts, rest assured that, of course, we also recorded some failure, but the number of failed attempts is only equate to 5, which means of the 24, 19 attempts were successful, which again gives us an approximate success rate of 78%. Yeah, you heard me correctly. 78%. Like, I don't even know how many of us got 78% at graduation for our master's or for our PhD. Like, 78% is excellent. If you are an academic and if you're receiving a mark or a grade of 78% on your research paper or any academic project, that means you did good. You did real good, man. So imagine, in Africa, this is the context. This is the current situation. Like the success rate, when it comes to constitutional coups, like constitutional modification for power extension is actually set at 78%. Yeah, take your time, okay? Imagine if we had the same success rate when it comes to implementation of public policy in education or health or transport or housing. Imagine if we had the same success rate when it comes to the granting of subsidies, for education, for housing, for, young people to have access to employment, for seed financing, imagine. So I'm just going to pause there, because this topic, like I said, is mind-blowing and we will all learn incredible stuff. Stay tuned to listen to part 2, where I will continue discussing this very interesting topic. And do not forget, thank you for your attention. Thank you for your time. This is definitely what I appreciated. And remember, S.I.K.A Talks is the only podcast where strong ideas meet powerful perspective. À bientôt.